little tiny moments of noticing. So that might mean right now, as you're listening to this, taking a minute to notice, how am I listening to this? Am I writing everything down and trying to get all the information? Am I doing this at the same time as doing something else? Am I letting my mind wander? Is this strategy that I'm going with, is it helping me, or do I need to adjust something right now?
Can you achieve extraordinary results while making the world a better place? I'm Bruce Temkin, and together we'll explore how. Welcome to Humanity at Scale, Redefining Leadership podcast. Join me as I speak with visionary leaders and top experts to uncover the secrets of humanity-centric leadership. Ready to rethink leadership? Let's dive in.
Welcome to Humanity at Scale. One of the biggest challenges for leaders today is this. How do people actually learn in a world that refuses to sit still? We've all seen the old models: classroom training, long courses, one-off workshops, but they often feel out of sync with the speed and messiness of real work. And if leaders can't figure out how their people really learn, they can't expect them to adapt, grow, or innovate. That's why I'm excited about today's guest. Tessa Forshaw is a cognitive scientist and co-founder of Harvard's Next Level Lab, where she studies how people build skills in real time through modern apprenticeship, creative problem solving, and even collaboration with AI. She's taught at both Harvard and Stanford, worked at IDEO and Accenture, and is the co-author with Rich Braden of the new book, Innovation-ish, which challenges the way we usually think about innovation. Tessa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we get into the research, I'd love to start with your story. You've moved across continents, as well as across domains such as design, consulting, and academia, before landing at Harvard in the learning sciences. How did you find your way into studying how people learn and adapt?
What a great question. So as you said, I have moved across the continent. I've also moved across countries. I'm originally from Australia, and I studied sociology in my undergraduate degree. And while I was doing that, I became very interested in how people in societies progress and how they face the future, and sort of what that looks like. But like most sociology majors, I wasn't entirely sure what to do, so I became a consultant, and that landed me at Accenture for the better part of a decade. And I learned a lot there, working predominantly in a talent and organization strategy and around future of work strategy. And that sparked a real interest for me in how we prepare people for the future, for changes. It became very clear that the pace of change was only accelerating, it wasn't slowing down. And we kept talking about the future of work as if like it was in the future, but it was sort of now, and we'd entered that state. And so that led me to Stanford, to my master's degree in the learning sciences. And then on after that, I did a PhD at Harvard. And that experience really was what said to me, hey, I need to go figure out how the brain learns so I can think about how we better prepare people for now when they're not prepared now.
You got me thinking. I know the name of your next book, Future of Workish.
Yes. Future-ish of work.
Awesome. So looking back, is there a research study or project you worked on that still sticks with you, something that shaped the way you think today?
When I was at Accenture, I did a research report as part of our thought leadership practice called New Skills Now. And I work with an amazing team. And one of the things that really stuck out to us was the role of, and at the time we didn't have the language for this, but the role of metacognition, or of thinking about your thinking and about being aware and agentive over your thoughts, and able to engage and practice executive function and creative problem solving and all of those sort of innately human skills. And it makes me laugh because that was the second research report I'd ever written on AI and the future of work. And that was in like 2015. So when we're actually at about, or 2016 maybe, we're at about 10 years on. And I think a lot of those core human elements that first came out in that report are still true and still guiding what I do today.
So here's a question, right? You're across domain. You're working in all these sort of changing environments. What do you tell your family back home you actually do for a living?
Absolutely. So I think I am first and foremost an academic. I'm a cognitive scientist and I study how people work, learn, and create. However, I also have kept my foot very much in the world of consulting for the simple reason of if I study things in an esoteric fashion that is disconnected from practice and not connected to the people and context that care about the issues, then like what is the point? So by having my foot in practice, I'm able to routinely create a feedback loop between the research that I'm doing and the lab is doing, between what is matters to leaders on the ground, what matters to workers on the ground, what problems they're facing, and sort of create that feedback loop so we stay relevant and practical.
Great. So you mentioned the lab. What is the Next Level Lab all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a research institute that sits within the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And we are the only research institute within that is dedicated to adult learning in the flow of work. So, what we really study is how adults learn, work, and innovate, or learn, work, and create in real life context, in situ, in the flow of things that are happening. And we draw upon the body of knowledge that is commonly referred to as learning sciences, which includes cognitive science, psychology, it includes neuroscience, anthropology, sociology, to really situate the learner in the real life context in which they exist and acknowledge their being, their cognition, and their context.
Great. So we often think of learning as something separate: training programs, classrooms, workshops. What does learning in the flow of work mean, and what does it look like in practice?
You're so right. We look at learning as this sort of separate didactic thing that happens in learning spaces. And yet, I would argue that nearly every working space is a learning space. And learning in the flow of work looks like things like cognitive apprenticeship. So, watching somebody else do something that you're trying to do and learning from watching them and seeing how it happens. Includes learning through informal mechanisms like it could be social media or YouTube or nowadays an LLM, accessing that in the moment that you need it and troubleshooting alongside it until you learn to be able to complete the task that you're doing. It means learning while you're engaging in the action of working or creating instead of learning outside of the action of working and creating.
I can think of lots of reasons why that would be valuable. One is just you're more cognitively aware and focused on the learning if you have an application to it at that time, right? Because you're paying more attention and it's more resonant to you. But what are the other strengths of thinking about learning in flow versus traditional approaches?
I mean, from a cognitive perspective, there are several. So, one of the first reasons that it's particularly helpful is that when you're doing something, you bring forward everything you know to be able to do the thing that you're doing. So, if you then learn in that moment, you're connecting that new knowledge quite literally to the other parts of your archival memory that are relevant to that knowledge. So then when you bring forward those pieces, it brings forward this new piece too. So you're connecting it in a more durable and applied way so that when you need to recall it, you're able to do that more effectively. So that's one reason why in learning in the flow in context is really helpful. Another is that, several hundred-year-old body of work that was largely started by Vygotsky, that learning is a social activity and learning happens through interactions with other people. And so when you are in situ, you are much more likely to be in real, authentic relationships that can support your learning. So that means that those relationships can do things like help you do a task to a degree that you wouldn't have been able to do by yourself because you had a guided other there able to support or scaffold or guide it. And then the third reason that it's I think incredibly important, or the research says it's incredibly important, is when you are trying to apply knowledge outside of the learning environment, one of the biggest challenges that we have is that the learning environment looks very different than the application environment. And I don't mean looks very different just from its structure, but also physically it looks different. The people are different. The spaces are different. The way you show up is different. All of these things are different. And that means that you're associating all of your learning with that context, and it's not as easy to then apply it and transfer it into the new situated context. So, learning in the flow of work means that you can access the learning much more easily, more quickly, and you lose less in that transfer cost.
So does that mean we should be getting rid of all those 1-week off-site training programs?
It's a great question. I think that they serve different purposes. So, off sites can have a great benefit of community building, especially helping people feel like they're part of a group or a team. So there's that element to it. They can also be very important when you're taking on complex problems to help remove you from sort of the day to day and give space. I would say that a way to help make an offsite like that more effective is to still have authentic work happening in the learning experience. And so that can sometimes look like the way I teach design, for example, at the Harvard Innovation Lab, is we do a real project for a real client over the period of time of the class. So it is a separate environment to the work environment, but we're emulating many axes and factors of that real environment in the learning environment.
Great. So I love that. So make the training have the context of work
Yeah.
so that it brings it out. Now, if you go to a world where sort of training, and I'll make it like black and white, it's not like this, where training is the responsibility of a training department and trainers who do it offsite, versus a world where training is in the flow, training while you're doing the work, does that add responsibility to leaders and managers and supervisors to augment their skills as trainers because they're no longer offloading that task to a training department over in the corner?
I would make the argument already that really good managers are also, and I use this word lightly, but also very good educators. I think that they're good at cognitive apprenticeship. They're good at making their thinking visible and sharing that learning with junior team members. They're good at creating opportunities for shadowing and for questioning and for feedback, for problem solving and testing. So, those essential practices that really good managers do, I think are going to become even more essential. And I think we're going to see that we need to start making those practices explicit rather than implicit in the management toolkit so that leaders are rewarded for being good educators in effect in the flow of work. That said, I don't think that the responsibility shifts away from L&D. And I know that there's a lot of discussion about this at the moment, and I'm hearing that from L&D leaders that I talk to as well. But what I think is interesting is that we need to adjust the infrastructure and the contexts of learning, yes, but learning is still happening, and we still need to be making sure that there's spaces and infrastructure and environments for it to happen. And so I think it's about shifting to, all right, well, what tools and technologies do we need now to facilitate learning in the flow of work versus learning in the click through LMS by itself classroom or the PowerPoint slides at the offsite? Understanding what skills what skill do managers need? How do we measure and test if the learning is happening to the extent that it needs to, if it's not a smile sheet in a classroom anymore? What does that look like now? So I do think that this is no way absolving responsibility, but instead, I think there's a lot to work through.
Usually a part of the HR function in lots of
Mhm.
large organizations. Now, I would argue that this transfer of focusing, of enabling leaders and existing organizations in their existing work is a much more profound role that all of the HR functions should be doing, as
Yeah.
opposed to working off the side, right? Embedding change inside instead of from outside.
I think the line between talent development and learning, for example, is becoming very, and performance manager, like all of those lines are starting to blur. And so it's really time for a bit of a reimagination.
If learning blurs into development, then learning has won, right? Like that's sort of what you want to see, right? That's what you're going for, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Learning should be in aid of development.
Great. All right. We have to get to the word AI. Sort of a requirement, and especially with sort of your work, it's changing how we define skill, creativity, and adaptability. The question is whether people will use it, right? But how it will shape what it means to learn and grow. How do you see AI augmenting human learning rather than replacing it or replacing it?
My colleague and co-writer, Rich Braden, has this phrase that he says, ask not what AI can do for you, but what you can do with AI. And I know he's definitely stealing from JFK there, but I love that quote. I think that the role of AI in learning is similar, not what can AI do for you, but what can L&D do with AI. And that's a completely different solution set, or idea set. And so I would say that when I mentioned before, what's that infrastructure look like now? I think that we have questions about, well, what, like, AI is clearly a part of that infrastructure. When learners are able to transfer existing skill sets to novel roles and they need to top up quickly, a helpful solution. Does it help them? Does it help personalize learning? And so uh, what it means to get a certificate now could be, that you demonstrate competencies through interactions with an agent versus through AI. So none of this is new. All of this has been being worked on for a long time. I was saying, for me, the exciting thing comes more though when you think about, if I am working in a world where I have to work alongside an AI agent as a colleague, and I have such a reaction to some of these org charts that are being shared around where it's like human resource, AI resource, that gives me the heebie-jeebies a little bit. I think it's, what does it look like? What skills do I need to make the most of what I can do with AI? That's the question that I think I'm the most excited about.
If you think about the whole notion of learning in the flow, do you think that like an AI coach or an AI trainer that is looking over your shoulder to some degree, not in a bad way, but trying to teach you things as you need them, is a potential really upgrade in the whole training environment?
It's a really good question. So I've been conducting a study at the moment with a very big, well-known consulting firm, and we've been looking at, or the intervention has been using a metacognitive informed AI agent to act as a leadership coach for managers who are bringing on new team members. And we have been comparing this to a human coach. And one of the things that is fascinating about this experience is that there are folks who use the AI agent first before the human coaching session. Like, you will say to me, oh, it would have been much more useful if I had the human coaching session and then I had the AI coaching session, because then I would have known how to interact with the AI. But on the flip side, folks who have the human coaching session first and the AI coaching session second are saying to me, I wish that I'd had the AI coaching agent first, because then I could have been better prepared to use the time that I had with the human coach. And so we haven't been seeing huge belief in the effectiveness of the AI agent, and we haven't seen that either in the subsequent like tests that we've run. But we keep seeing them wanting to find the effectiveness sweet spot. So they, like I said to you, they will say, "Oh, it would be more effective if it was the opposite to what I had." But then the people in the opposite say the same. And I think that is a really interesting insight, that everybody wants to find its most useful place because they inherently believe that there is one, and yet when put next to a human, it's never going to be the most effective option. However, human coaching isn't always scalable. And it takes, when our human coaching efforts often have to get rescheduled 4 or 5 times to find an hour with these folks. And so I think that there's a little bit of it could be really helpful, but we're not seeing it yet.
Yeah, it sounds like I would characterize sort of those results as the immaturity of the human AI mix, right?
Yeah.
AI doesn't yet know exactly what it should be doing to help the humans effectively, and the humans don't completely understand how best to use the AI effectively. So
Yeah,
there's this mental juggling going on to figure out
exactly.
how it all, yeah. Cool. Well, we've been talking a little bit about you talked about future of work a little bit earlier, but let's talk about that directly. And as you said, the future of work is really the current change of work that we haven't really admitted to. Um, what do you see as the biggest changes shaping the way that we work and the way that we learn?
One really big change today is that we're expected to be able to take on novel roles and tasks at a rate that's far greater than ever before. So in the past, if you look at my parents, for example, had the same job their entire career, and for that matter, worked at one company for most of it in one function. And that's not a common story anymore. But it's not just that we're taking on different careers, it's that the very nature of the tasks we're doing and the pace of change within those careers is so significant that we're constantly needing to do new things, and yet we're given very little time for learning how to do them. Needing time and space to learn a new tool is no longer really considered an acceptable reason for a delay. It's sort of expected to be taken in the stride of the employee. And so I think that is new to this current moment, is that we need to learn how to leverage existing skills and assets, transfer them into novel contexts, quickly top up with whatever we can and what's available to us, and kind of keep going and continue that cycle of novel transfer forward. So that same end, something else that's quite new in this moment is the expectation that you figure it out versus, or in previous eras, if a new technology was implemented across a business or something, you would often see very robust training programs that went alongside the rollout. Those sorts of things are less and less common.
Interesting. So, and on top of that, right, we're going from co-located environments where there was just sort of natural coaching and mentorship to these distributed environments that don't. So, in this world where people need to change skills quickly and learn things fast, any thoughts on what individuals, the people taking on jobs or entering the job market now, what they need to do to thrive in that environment?
I would say that one of the biggest things that is helpful in this current moment in time is building a personal practice of metacognition. So, meta meaning like above, and cognition meaning your thinking and feeling. So, metacognition then is thinking about your thinking and feeling, and it is an essential personal practice that can help you think about, where have I done this before? What skills did I bring forward to approach it? How did they help me? Did that strategy I just tried work? No. What other strategies could I try? Am I bringing in biases into what I'm thinking? So it's this sort of real time interrogation of your thinking and feeling and being, and adjusting it and monitoring it to fit it to the context. In the studies that have been done on learners that are metacognitive, they tend to have significantly higher rates of success when all other variables are controlled for, which is quite profound by itself. But on the innovation and the creative problem solving side, we also see that workers who are more metacognitive have better novel products, better novel ideas, better scores in creative problem solving exercises and things like that. So it's a very helpful tool.
I love that. I oftentimes talk about leaders having to do 2 things, intention and reflection, right? And starting with a purpose and a direction and then reflecting and learning, so sort of the metacognition. But is there for people who don't have that skill now, do you have a couple thoughts on how they can start becoming more metacognitive?
Absolutely. Noticing little tiny moments of noticing. So that might mean right now, as you're listening to this, taking a minute to notice, how am I listening to this? Am I writing everything down and trying to get all the information? Am I doing this at the same time as doing something else? Am I letting my mind wander? Is this strategy that I'm going with, is it helping me, or do I need to adjust something right now? Maybe I need to go for a walk. Maybe I need to sit down and take notes based on whatever your goal is for engaging with this podcast. So that's that simple moment of noticing and then seeing if that's serving your purpose is the best way to start. And you can do that about anything, about this podcast, about being present with your kids, about, your workout, your the next meeting you have at work, um, anything like that you can be metacognitive about.
Awesome. So I don't think anyone who came to this podcast today was thinking, I am going to learn how to be metacognitive, but you've got sort of a bonus for our listeners. Well, I'd love to change focus and talk about your new book. It's innovation-ish. We talked about that. And I think it's already getting rave reviews, which congratulations on that. It's always fun with early book. The title feels like a playful challenge. Why innovation-ish? What are you trying to reframe?
My co-author, Rich Braden, and I have been teaching nearly for 10 years together, creativity and innovation and design thinking. And something that really brought us together was this surprise at how few students felt like they were innovative or creative. At the beginning of class, we often say, hey, hands up if you think you're creative. And less than 10% of students often will put their hand up. And that's in student classes, and that's in universities, but also in corporate workshops and boardrooms. And it's quite surprising. I will say that in my 5-year-old daughter's classroom, every hand went up. In fact, most students put up both hands to show their enthusiasm. It's definitely something that has surprised us because we then spend, huge amount of time with these students in a very intense class environment, and we see how incredible they are and how creative they are. And it shocks us that they don't see that about themselves. And so we started to look in a little bit more to why that was. And one of the many things, but one of the things that came out of that was this sort of myth around what innovation was. When you say the word, people think innovation and they think, going to the moon, going to Mars. They think huge, groundbreaking innovations. They often name the same sort of 5 to 10 sole innovators, your classic like Thomas Edison, Steve Jobs, etc. There's about 5 to 10 of them that they will all name. And they also think, oh, Silicon Valley and billions of dollars. Like that's the stereotype. And so the point of this book was to lower the bar a little bit to what we meant by innovation, because we believe that innovation can be, small incremental improvements, like a redo of your company expense processing. I know that if someone did that for me right now, I would love them and that would change my life. So we wanted to lower the bar to innovation. And so we made it more like innovation-ish. And what we noticed when we did that in class was people smile, they sort of laugh a little bit, and straight away they're like, yeah, I can kind of sort of be innovation-ish. I could do that. And the entry ramp just seemed so much easier, and they weren't in this like shock and awe state anymore.
You make it accessible. So what happens? Is there a low bar to it? Like if I write a sentence and decide to replace one word in the sentence, is that innovation? Is there some low standard that we consider innovation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the book, we talk about sort of a spectrum of innovation, everything from what we call moonshots, which are the classic ones I just talked about, all the way down to what we call a roof shot. So I think that a roof shot's a little bit bigger than a sentence shot, maybe. And so the idea of a roof shot is something that is new to you in your context, and that is the way that we consider it. A great example of the sort of scales as well is my co-author and I were recently in NEOM visiting the Line, the big city that's being built. That's like the first vertical city in the world. And I would call that like a Mars shot, like it's a huge effort. What really struck me while we were being shown around by the incredible folks there was how many roof shots or jump shots, like smaller improvements, were happening in service of the big one. So a great example is changing the kind of jack that's used to raise something, a piece of construction material, because of the wind conditions of where it was happening, or changing the type of energy source used to power something, or all of these much smaller level, not groundbreaking revolutionary, but still very important innovations that are happening in service this bigger one. And we wanted to remind people that they are important, they're the majority, and that they can do those things.
You have a background in learning and experience design and design. How did you use those to shape the format, flow, and structure of the book?
The book is based around three core cognitive science concepts. They are mindsets, so your mindset that you choose to engage, which shapes your attention and perception. The second concept is what we call moves, and that is about having small, digestible chunks that you can repeat and use and get a dopamine hit every time you do one. And the last one is metacognition, which we've just talked a bit about. And so the book is centered around those three things. Um, However, the design of the book takes the reader on a little bit of what we would call a spiral curriculum. And so that means we start with like a full taste very quickly at the beginning. And then as you get a bit through it, you've gone on like a bigger taste of everything. And then we spend, the sort of last part of the book doing a much bigger deep dive in everything. And that's because what we want to do is help you understand the concepts, then we want to help you expand on them, and then we want to help you build deeper expertise in them. So that's why we use that sort of spiral approach in the book.
You talked about one myth about innovation, and that is that there are only moonshots, right? What other myths about innovation do you think hold leaders back?
I think a really big one is this myth or this notion that people have innate creativity and that they're either creative or they're not. So that's not true. First off, that comes from this belief often in the right brain or the left brain. You might have heard people say, "Oh, I'm left brain, I'm analytical, or I'm right brain, I'm this," or whatever it is. Well, there's actually an incredible amount of research that has been done using neuroimaging and fMRI and things like that. And there's no such thing as a creative brain or an analytical brain. And there's, in neurotypical people, no such thing as hemispheric dominance either. And so that's a complete myth, that somebody is creative or analytical. Second to that, to be creative, you actually need analytical strategies. You need convergent thinking. You need executive function. And to be analytical, you need creative strategies. Sometimes you need to diverge, to question, to think about possibilities and alternatives. So, this sort of dichotomy is a huge myth that I think really holds people back.
Great. Well, if leaders take just one shift from your book, what do you hope it will be?
I hope that they realize that by doing one small thing, they can improve the innovation-ishness of their work. You don't have to do the whole thing. It doesn't have to be about, we've implemented this new process, we've trained everyone in it, and we're going to all do it from beginning to end. Innovation can be about just trying one mindset and one move and reflecting on it and making the thing that you're doing at the moment that you're doing it just that little bit more innovation-ish.
If those leaders do that and they do more and they adopt all the great stuff in your book, how might the future of work and learning and innovation feel different in 10 years? What do you hope that the world looks like?
I love that question. I think one of my greatest hopes that centers a lot of my work is that I hope people become empowered users of their own minds. I think there is an incredible power in understanding how your mind works and in using it effectively and not working against how your brain works, but working for it. And so I would love to see cultures of learning and innovation and working that really aligned with the science of what we know about how our minds work.
I think that's a great ending for the discussion about the book because you painted such a wonderful future about what it's a blueprint
Thanks.
for. So maybe I shift into my closing questions. These are a set of questions that I ask everyone. Um, First one, what's one leadership skill that you think will become even more important in the future?
The ability to hold space and acknowledge, ambiguity, discomfort, and risk while not taking responsibility for it. So what I mean by that is in the book we talk a lot about cognitive caution and the natural propensity to stand away from innovation because of social acceptance, because of innate cognitive processes, because of a dislike of ambiguity. And in a world where there's so much ambiguity, uncertainty, and all of those things, sometimes the context and the cognitive caution of your team members is a lot, but it's also not your fault that it's there. And so I think that ability to hold space, acknowledge the feeling, acknowledge that it exists, and then help craft a way forward that's sort of separate to that is really important. And I think leaders need to get better at that.
And now I'm going to do something. I empower all my guests with a magic wand. Now, if you can wave it and make immediate change, what would you do to make organizations more humanity centric?
It sort of comes back to what I said earlier, which is I would have them consider policies and practices that amplify how human minds work and understand how to use that to improve the experience of learning and working and creating. But along with that, that means um, improving the outcomes. I think it's a, I think a great example is like with the, remote work debate. Very rarely, or if ever, do you hear someone say, okay, well, what are the cognitive consequences or impacts, or what kind of physical environments do we need to optimize our like neurological functioning, our cognitive functioning? Instead, it's like very focused on people's opinions. And so that's something that I think we could do better at. And I would love to see happen if I had a magic one.
And what's one final piece of advice you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Practice metacognition. I think it sounds silly, but especially as we enter the age of having AI agents that we work with closely, I think you need to not only have metacognition about your own thinking, you're going to need to have metacognition about the agent's thinking. And so, really starting to practice and deliberately engage with that skill set is going to set you up for greater success.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me on the podcast, Tessa.
Thanks so much for having me, Bruce.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Tessa Forshaw. Now let's move into the after show, where I'll reflect on some key takeaways from today's discussion. Welcome to the after show. I really enjoyed my conversation with Tessa Forshaw. It was energizing to hear how her journey across design, consulting, and academia all comes together. She brings the rigor of research, the practicality of consulting, and the creativity of design, and it makes her perspective on learning and innovation unusually grounded and fresh. Here are some takeaways that really stood out to me from our conversation. The first is that every working space is a learning space. Tessa reminded us that nearly every job setting has the potential to be a classroom if we choose to treat it that way. When people learn in the middle of work, whether it's shadowing a teammate, experimenting with a new tool, or just troubleshooting as they go, knowledge gets connected to the context where it will actually be used. That makes it easier to recall later and harder to lose in translation. The second takeaway is that managers are also educators. I loved her framing of cognitive apprenticeship. The best leaders don't just hand down tasks. They open up their decision making, show their thinking, and let others practice alongside them. Tessa argued that this kind of teaching has always been a part of great management, but now we need to make it explicit and intentional. It's a shift from seeing managers as supervisors to seeing them as everyday teachers. The third takeaway is that metacognition is a game changer. You weren't expecting to hear a lot about metacognition, but we talked a bit about it as this idea came up again and again in our conversation. It's the practice of noticing your own thinking while you're in the middle of it. Tessa gave that great example. Even right now, how are you listening? Are you multitasking, zoning out, or fully present? That tiny act of awareness allows you to adjust in the moment and over time. It builds into a skill that helps you learn faster, solve problems more creatively, and avoid blind spots. The fourth takeaway is that AI should augment, not replace. Tessa shared that memorable line from her co-author Rich Braden. Ask not what AI can do for you, but what you can do with AI. She walked us through their research comparing AI coaches with human coaches. The results showed people don't quite trust AI and know how to use it yet, but they keep searching for how it could be useful. That tells me there's a deep belief that AI belongs in the mix, not just as a replacement for human judgment, but as an amplifier of it. And the final takeaway is that innovation doesn't have to be a moonshot. This is the heart of her new book with Rich Braden, Innovation-ish. Tessa described how students in her classes often say they're not creative until you lower the bar. When you reframe innovation as a roof shot, the small, meaningful improvements that solve everyday problems, suddenly people see themselves differently. They stop waiting for billion-dollar breakthroughs and start experimenting in the moment. That democratizes innovation and makes it part of the culture, not the job of a select few. I highly suggest you get a copy of their book. So here are two questions I'll leave you with. How can you bring more metacognition into your own work this week, pausing to notice your thinking before you act? And what's one roof shot, a small practical improvement you can make that would matter for your team? That's it for the after show. I hope you enjoyed this episode.
Thanks for tuning in to Humanity at Scale, Redefining Leadership podcast. Remember, true leadership isn't only about achieving short-term results. It's about creating a lasting positive impact on all of the people you touch. Join me next time as we uncover more insights and strategies for humanity-centric leadership. Until then, I'm Bruce Temkin, encouraging you to lead with purpose and empathy and to be the spark that elevates humanity at scale.